What's up, fellas? In the second video of the day, we're looking at an NBA trade machine, and this time it is for the San Antonio Spurs. The reason that I picked the Spurs for this week for you guys to send me some trades for is they're in a really interesting spot. There's rumors flying around about the possibility of them shopping DeMar DeRozan and Marcus Aldridge. They've got a really nice group of young players and veterans, and so they can really go either direction here. They can try and add a star to potentially push this team even further, towards the top of the standings in the Western Conference. They can dump some of their players on expiring contracts to get value and provide more minutes for the younger guys, or they can do something in between. There's a combination of different scenarios with these trades in this video, but the Spurs are a very, very interesting team to take a look at as we get closer to the trade deadline. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every single day on this channel, so it's the most consistent NBA content on YouTube. If you're new here, what's up? My name is Tucker, by the way. You can leave a like rating on the videos if you enjoy them, and you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen in a link tree down in the description below. With those things said, let's go ahead and take a look at some trades for the San Antonio Spurs. So the first one is sent to me by Bem. He says the Spurs received James Johnson, Dwight Powell, Josh Green, and 3 second-round picks in exchange for DeMar DeRozan. Now, when I scrolled through the replies for this Spurs trade machine, there were a lot of Spurs fans that were getting very passionate about the return that they were getting in exchange for DeMar, in exchange for Marcus Aldridge. And here's what I would say, because I'm sure some Spurs fans are looking at this trade and they're like, what am I looking at? This is not enough for DeMar DeRozan. I understand that DeMar DeRozan's having an all-star caliber year, but he's an expiring contract, he's getting a little bit older, and people know that one of the reasons that DeMar is playing so well is because he's in San Antonio, and they have a history of boosting the value of players within their own system, and other teams not being able to get quite that same level of production out of a player like DeMar DeRozan, okay? So don't expect a ton of first-round picks in exchange for DeMar if you're going to dump him, because the whole point here is just to get value out of him before he reaches free agency. You've got plenty of other young players on the roster. You're just trying to get something out of him before he potentially leaves, or before you have to potentially pay him a significant number in the offseason that you don't necessarily want to pay him. So I understand you're having a good season, but if you want to prioritize the young guys a little bit more, you can get value out of DeRozan, and this would be an example. So the Spurs are getting expiring contract James Johnson, Dwight Powell, who I think is a fine player, but isn't necessarily anything game-breaking. Josh Green could be a really, really interesting player for them moving forward. The Spurs do a great job of developing players. They've already got a ton of other young guards, but if they wanted to throw another one into the mix here, then Josh Green would not be a bad idea. And then 3 second-round picks. I don't think this is fantastic value for San Antonio, but if you're just committed to getting rid of DeMar, this would be one to look at. I think they'd rather bring in more of like a wing combo forward type guy in exchange for DeRozan, because they already have a ton of guards, but Josh Green certainly is a talented player with nice potential. Then for Dallas, this kind of serves 2 purposes. 3 purposes, really. 1, you dump the Dwight Powell contract, opening up some more cap space room for you in the offseason. 2, you add a star to this group to potentially really help you moving forward. Another offensive player that can help take some of the offensive burden off of Luka, and this doesn't negatively impact any of your 2021 free agency plans. You still go into that offseason with actually even more cap space now than you would have before, because you're able to dump the Powell contract, and because DeRozan is a expiring contract and a 2021 free agent, and he's a player that, yes, you gave up Josh Green in 3 seconds, but you didn't give up a ton. So if DeMar did end up leaving and you brought in someone like Oladipo or whatever the case may be, then you didn't really lose a ton of value here. The issue with this for Dallas would be, why wouldn't you just go sign DeMar in the offseason if you really wanted to go and get him, rather than giving up these assets? I think that's a fair point. Ultimately, it depends on your opinion here. I think San Antonio probably says no to this. I think Dallas would take a pretty long, hard look, depending on how they feel like DeMar fits in to their current roster. Next up now is a trade sent to me from Darian, and he says that the Celtics would receive LaMarcus Aldridge in exchange for Daniel Tice, Carson Edwards, Romeo Langford, and a second-round pick via Oklahoma City. So again, the mindset here for San Antonio is you're not expecting to get a ton back in exchange for LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMar DeRozan. Less so for Aldridge, because honestly, he looks pretty washed. And the Celtics using up this trade exception here, they're getting an expiring in LaMarcus Aldridge, so that, doesn't hugely impact them long-term in terms of using the trade exception for this year, because the money just comes off next year. Anyway, they're giving up Tice, Edwards, Langford, and a second-round pick. I think that Romeo Langford's a good player. I think he's a player that San Antonio would like to have. And he's got nice potential as a really good 3-and-D wing down the road. Got good length, good athleticism. I think Romeo Langford's a solid player. Carson Edwards, is whatever. Daniel Tice, I'm sure, will play a little bit for San Antonio, but mostly it's about getting Langford in the second round pick, which if I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan, I would take. I don't really think LaMarcus Aldridge has a ton left in the tank, and getting someone like Langford that I think actually fits pretty well long term with this roster is a good idea, especially considering I'm probably not re-signing Aldridge at the end of the season. Anyway, for Boston, this is probably lower down on the priority list among potential moves for them to make via this trade exception or just in general on this roster. It's pretty clear they're looking for like a 4 or 5 type guy to add to this group to upgrade their roster. And I think Aldridge would be someone they would take a look at, but maybe a little bit further down on the priority list. The positive here is you're not giving up a ton. You're not giving up future firsts like you would potentially for like Nikola Vucevic. You're not giving up a ton in terms of taking on long-term salary because, again, Aldridge is an expiring contract. So I think it's an interesting one for either to take a look at. If I was San Antonio, I would probably say yes. If I'm Boston, if we get closer to the deadline, I can't bring anybody else in, I'd probably say yes. But prior to that, probably die. Next up now, we have a trade from Anson in which the San Antonio Spurs receive Mike Scott, Cody Zeller, and 2 second-round picks. The Hornets get LaMarcus Aldridge and a first from Philly, and the Sixers get Malik Monk. This is an interesting one because I don't really know why the first round pick needs to be thrown in right there, but we'll kind of take a look at the whole thing. So the Spurs are giving up Aldridge. They're getting Zeller, Scott, and 2 seconds. Again, getting some kind of value out of LaMarcus Aldridge for these. You get the 2 second round picks. Zeller's a fine player, and then Mike Scott, is okay as well. Those are 2 expiring. Basically, if you're San Antonio, you're getting a couple seconds for LaMarcus Aldridge. The Hornets are getting Aldridge and a first, which I'm confused by. I don't know why Philly is giving up a first round pick to get Malik Monk here. Malik Monk's a fine player. I like Malik Monk, but I don't know why they're giving up a first. But for Charlotte, Zeller's a nice player, but Aldridge upgrades the scoring capacity of this group, potentially an upgrade for them in the front court. And then for Philly, Malik Monk is someone that I think is talented. Again, I don't know why you're giving up a first here, but someone that can shoot, someone that can create his own shot is a really interesting addition to a Philly team that has a relatively rigid roster from an offensive standpoint. Everybody kind of is set into their role, and if you wanted to add a bit more of a wild card to the group that can explode for 20-25 points on any given night, bringing in Malik Monk is not a bad addition. So Anton, thank you so much for sending this trade in. Next up now, we have a trade from Chen in which DeMar DeRozan ends up in Boston. It's similar to the Marcus Aldridge thing. And in this scenario, the Spurs get Langford, Williams, Naismith, and 2 firsts, or a first and a pick swap. Wow, that's a lot in exchange for DeMar DeRozan. Maybe you're one of those Spurs fans that's looking at this and thinking, finally, good value in exchange for DeMar DeRozan. I don't think there's any scenario in which Boston gives up this much in exchange for a guy in DeRozan that's on an expiring contract. I think it would be really interesting to see DeMar in Boston. You could potentially roll out a lineup if you really wanted to of like Kemba, Smart, DeRozan, Tatum, and Brown. Or maybe you could use DeRozan or Kemba as more of a second unit guy to really create and facilitate. Because I think that's something they're really missing is someone else to be able to create shots outside of Brown, Tatum, and the occasional really good Kemba Walker game. So it's an interesting addition. I don't agree with the compensation here. I don't think Boston's going to give up Langford, who again I think is good. Naismith, who they literally just drafted, a first and a pick swap in exchange for DeMar. If you want to take both the picks away, Boston probably takes a look at that, but then San Antonio's like, well, where are our picks? Maybe do Langford and a first, something along that level of compensation I think is way more fair. If I'm San Antonio and Boston called me with this tomorrow, I'm accepting the trade and I'm not even thinking twice. And like, I'm really, really trying to push to get the trade done as quickly as possible because I feel like someone from Boston might have accidentally thrown in someone extra to the deal. Like this would be huge, huge value for San Antonio in exchange for DeMar. And it'd be something I would certainly take a look at. If I'm Boston though, I would try and, tone down some of the compensation here. Second to last now, we have a trade from E in which the Spurs receive Rashawn Holmes, Buddy Hield, and a lottery protected 2022 first in exchange for Aldridge and Lonnie Walker. This one really intrigues me for a couple of reasons. One, as I said, the Spurs have a lot of young guards. I kind of feel like they need to pick one. And so getting rid of Lonnie Walker here to get some value back is not a bad play because they've already got so many guards that I think can be good. And I don't want any of them to get lost in the shuffle. So shipping one out and Lonnie Walker to Sacramento will have a bit more of an opportunity, I think is a really interesting move. You're getting rid of the Aldridge contract here. You're bringing in Holmes, who I think is a good center, is going to need new contracting in the season, just like Aldridge. But the Buddy Hield piece of this is really interesting because Buddy Hield is one of those players where I feel like Sacramento doesn't really want him. He doesn't really want to be there. But as soon as he gets to San Antonio, he's probably a 20-point per game guy. He's going to shoot a ton of threes. They're going to put him in the right positions. He's going to be someone that they're going to be able to raise the value up of. and you're getting a pick from Sacramento as well. Granted, it's lottery protected. So this to me feels like a lot of value to get in exchange for Walker and Aldridge. But if you're Sacramento and you just want to dump the Buddy Hield money and you want to get back some half-decent players, this is not a bad option. For San Antonio, I think this is one to take a long, hard look at because of the potential of bringing someone in like Buddy Hield that I think could be really, really good there in San Antonio, and you get the pick as well. And then last up now, there's a reason the title says 5 realistic trades, because there's actually 6, but this is the 6th one. It's not realistic, but it's fun. The Spurs receive Bradley Beal, Clint Capella, and a 2nd-round pick. The Wizards get DeMar DeRozan, Chris Dunn, John Collins, and a 2nd. The Hawks get LaMarcus Aldridge and Ish Smith. So here's my first issue. Atlanta is not getting anything out of this deal. They're dumping Capella and John Collins and Chris Dunn. They're getting LaMarcus Aldridge and Ish Smith. That doesn't really work for me. This is a team that's trying to win now. Aldridge is fine, but I'd rather have John Collins on my roster, and you're also giving up Capella. So, I don't understand the Atlanta part of this, but the idea of Bradley Beal in San Antonio, the idea of Washington getting Collins there within their group, and then, whatever you think DeMar DeRozan still has left, is really interesting. But what it comes down to is the fact that San Antonio could end up with Bradley Beal and Clint Capella as part of this deal, and just the idea of Beal in San Antonio would be super, super interesting. They've got a lot of defensive guards to surround him with to where they can limit some of his defensive limitations. And just the idea of Bradley Beal in San Antonio is really, really interesting. So, Miguel, thank you for sending it in. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think Atlanta's getting anything out of this, but the overall point here is Bradley Beal in San Antonio would be really, really interesting. But that is going to be the end of the second video of the day, and I thank you all very much for watching. Thank you guys so much for all the people that sent in trades. If you're that person that's just going through and all the replies saying, oh, this is an awful trade, try and come up with one sometime, because it's not very easy to come up with a trade that a lot of people agree with. A lot of people have varying opinions on this kind of stuff, and that's why it's one of the most fun series that I do in this channel, is to kind of see what everybody thinks about each of these trades. But that is going to be the end of the second video of the day, and I thank you all very much for watching. If you're missing any of my previous videos, you want to check out more videos from me, check out the boxes on screen, as well as the channel as a whole. As I said in the beginning, my name is Tucker. Hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.